I was dead before I hit the floor. And I was immediately outside my body. We went straight to the life review. I'd experienced 7 years of the 9 that I was bullied. Why? Why am I suffering so much? Why am I going through so much pain? Was I a dictator in a past life? Was I Hitler? What exactly did I do? And the only thing I remember him saying was, we can show you the reasons for why you're going through this, but it will not be a pleasant experience for you. I needed to know. And so they took me back to the exact same pod that I just left. I was having to see and feel every single one of them. It felt like he was staring into my soul. And it broke me in ways that I cannot describe to you. I screamed out, please make this stop. I can't take anymore. Get me out of this thing. You asked to see this. You wanted to know why we can't stop this. You have to see it through. I ended up exploring the whole galaxy. I saw evidence of multiple other species.
Okay, so Andrew, we said in the very beginning of the interview that you were on the other side for what was the equivalent of 12 Earth years. And you said that you spent 5 of those learning only 2 things. Still have questions after watching these videos? Perfect. Come hang out with me on Wake Up Wednesday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Mountain, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern, where we will answer your questions live. And you never know what surprise guests might show up. Thank you for watching. My guest today is Andrew Bauer, who had 2 near-death experiences. And in the second one, he was dead for 7 minutes, but experienced 12 years of earthly time on the other side. He saw things like the future of humanity. So, Andrew, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to this.
Me too, especially because the reason that we're talking today is because a couple of weeks ago, I had my friend Ned on the show, who runs a Facebook group that has 300,000 NDE members. And one of the questions I asked him was, what is one of the standout NDEs that you've heard? And he's heard thousands of them, and yours was his number one. And I feel very blessed that we got you scheduled to come on the show and to share this experience with us today. So thank you.
I'm always glad to do this. It's so much fun.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and dive into it. So part 2.
Yeah.
Part
two.
NDE number 2.
Yeah, and this is where it gets fun. So the second one happened in 14, 7 years after the first one. It happened because of one of the many head injuries I had because of bullying. It was my 3rd skull fracture out of the first. I have had 4 total, but the last one was here. So I had 3 from bullying. That was the last of them. It was at a camp that I went to about 2 hours away from home. And unfortunately, I did not know at the time that one of my many bullies had gone to the same camp, found or saw me there, and immediately came charging after me to hit me. And so the way this camp was, it was an old farm that had been donated to the group that ran this camp. And the reason why was because the family who owned the farm, their son had been a part of this group and had a condition like muscular dystrophy or something where he died young. But he had some of the best experiences he had in his life while he was alive were with this group at their camps. And so they donated their property, or I guess they moved into a house somewhere else where they had a space they needed, but they donated their old farm to this group. And so the 3-story barn that they had, where the 3rd story was the loft, topped by an A-frame roof. The bottom floor was the cafeteria, the offices, all the kind of logistical space. Second floor was a few more parts of that, and then where the staff slept. And then the 3rd floor, the loft, is where the kids slept. So I was up on the third floor, and the way this roof was, like I said, it was an A-frame roof supported by 4x4 wood beams, and the way each beam was flat, where the bottom was, bottom was flat, top was flat, and so there was a corner where the bottom and the side met, where it was jutting out into the room on each beam. There's about every 4 feet was one of these beams. And so when this kid hit me, he hit me kind of midsection, and bent me forward. Like as he pushed me backward, so my first instinct was to bend in half, to kind of fold in half. And as he pushed me backward, he slammed me full force into one of these beams where it hit my brain stem because my head was bent forward. So it impacted my brain stem directly. And for those who aren't aware, brainstem controls all of your basic life functions, your heart, your lungs, everything like that. It's the most basic part of your limbic system. And so my heart and lungs stopped immediately. I was dead before I hit the floor. And I was immediately outside my body. Um, I watched as the kid started screaming. The kid who hit me got scared, ran off. They eventually found him later on. I don't I don't think they called the cops because my parents basically forgave him uh, for what he did. They didn't want to ruin his life. Um, but the kids kept screaming for the staff. Staff came running. Luckily, one of them they had to have at least 3 people on staff who were CPR trained in case something happened. And so one of them got to me first and started doing chest compressions and the breaths. And the training for CPR has changed over the years, but at the time it was like, I think it was like 10 compressions to 3 breaths is the ratio they used to use. And so he started doing this while somebody else called for an ambulance. Um, the hospital where the ambulance was stationed was about almost not quite 5 minutes away at their top speed. So they took about 4.5 minutes to get there. So I was down already, and he was doing chest compressions, but I was still heart was flatlined. My lungs, I was not breathing. There was nothing coming as far as my body was concerned. And so the ambulance took 4.5 minutes to get there, and then these guys had to come up 3 flights of stairs with the stretcher to get to where I was, um, and then carry me back down as they're performing CPR, which I give those guys a lot of credit because they worked under some of the most trying circumstances you can imagine. But one of the paramedics took over as they went down the stairs, and then when they got to the bottom floor, one of the guys who helped carry the stretcher down with me on it joined him. He did the breast with a squeeze bag, and the other guy kept doing the chest compressions, and then he switched every couple minutes so that they wouldn't get tired. And so the whole time I was, like I said, I immediately left my body as soon as I hit that beam. So I was watching this whole thing, and as they moved down the stairs, I went through the floor, following them all the way down to the bottom, and then followed them out to the ambulance. Like almost like if you can imagine being tied 30 feet from your body, and everywhere your body goes, you have to stay within 30 feet of it. So it kind of dragged me along as they
Kind
went
of
out
like
to
a
the
kite on a
ambulance.
string.
Yeah, literally like a kite on a string. It's a perfect way to do it. It's a good analogy. Um, so I was like that kite, and I was just being pulled down through the floors, out to the ambulance. And so I was in the back corner of the ambulance as they rushed to the hospital. And about a minute out from the hospital is when they finally got heart rate reestablished. And then after that, they got my breathing restarted on the way into the ER. But by the time they got this done, I was already down 7.5 minutes. Now, 7 minutes is the dividing line. That's when you start having brain death in a lot of cases. Now, not always the case, but for most people, 7 minutes is that kind of that golden line between you're more likely to be coming back or you're more likely to stay dead. And there are, the further away you get from that 7 minute span, the more or less people come back. Uh, so As soon as we got into the ambulance, I heard the same voice, the sing-songy, calming voice. And at this point, I knew what was coming. I knew I was dead right off the bat. There was no doubt. I knew what death was at that point. I'd seen my friend die just 2 years earlier. Um, I had my first near-death experience already. I knew exactly what was happening. And so as soon as I heard my guide's voice, I remember like internally, I just smiled, like, oh, thank God I'm back here again. Like I'm finally back. Like I've been wanting to go there ever since the first one, and it's not like I wanted to end my life or something, but I just felt like if something happens and I end up back here, I won't be disappointed, you know, because I really want to go back there again. But he immediately, I found myself in that same acclimation room, but I told him I'm ready. We can go ahead and move on. I don't need time to adjust. I'm already there. And he knew it already, but he gave me the time just in case I wanted it. And so we went straight to the life review. Not much had changed with this lifetime. I'd done a few other things, like every teenager, I did stupid things, but nothing majorly bad. And but then after that life review, before anything else, I remember that the thought came into my head. At this point, I'd experienced 7 years of the 9 that I was bullied. I'd experienced all but 2 of the head injuries, including the one that just sent me here again. And but what I didn't know was why. Why am I suffering so much? Why am I going through so much pain? And uh, so I asked, I asked in my telepath voice, just like, why is this going on? Why am I being hit all the time? And I remember I kept visualizing all these times these kids would run up from behind me and pop me in the mouth and knock my braces off at the time, and or another guy like punched me in the back of the head, knocked me to the floor. 3 kids that jumped me on the way home from school in first grade and jumped up and down on my back and broke my tailbone. It gave me the back problems I've had my whole life. I'm like, but why did all this happen? Like, what did I do? Was I like a dictator in a past life? Was I Hitler? Like, what exactly did I do? Who did I piss off to end up suffering like this? And I remember my guide stopped just for a second, just paused, and it was like, you ever heard of what they call a pregnant pause, where you're just like, oh God, what's coming next? That's how it felt. And I remember, even though his body was facing away from me. Of course, you could see in all directions, so he could see me. But it felt like he was like, I wish he hadn't asked that question, kind of mentality to him. And because he knew I was going to ask it, he'd always known. He was there, of course, the first time I went through the life review. Um, so he'd been my guide ever since I've been on Earth. So going back almost 350 years at this point. So he knew I was going to ask, and I almost wish I didn't. And he turned around and he looked me in the eyes. And I remember, even though his voice was kind, even though his eyes were kind, there was a sadness to him that I had a hard time explaining. And the only thing I remember him saying was, we can show you the reasons for why you're going through this, but it will not be a pleasant experience for you. And I guess I should have thought of that as a red flag, but at the time, and I guess even if you asked me to do it over again, I probably would still do the same thing. I've always been the kind of person, I think a lot of people are this way, where it's better to know something even though it's bad, even though it's painful. It's better to know it than not know and wonder. It's worse. And so I needed to know. And so they took me back to the exact same pod that I just left and put me in. And I remember the same tingling in the back of my mind, or whatever you want to call it. And um, but it felt different this time. Like there was more to it coming. And as soon as I woke up, or as soon as I came to in this pod, I was in a place I'd never been to before that felt familiar. And then as soon as I looked around, it hit me. This is the same place that I was in the last time I had a near-death experience. That place in Switzerland with the Matterhorn, so I could see it in the distance. And I realized, oh wow, that's why I've been keep going to that place. Look how beautiful this is. I didn't realize even then why I was so tied to this place, but I would know in a few minutes or however long it took. So the reason I was seeing all three of these previous lifetimes before this one was because they wanted me to see what an ideal life looked like when you follow your life path, the way you're supposed to, how good your life can be, how positive it can be, how many people you can help, how everything can go so well when you follow your life path as it's intended to be. They wanted me to see that first because the next life that they showed me was the exact opposite. It was like if everything it was what I call the Murphy's Law life. Anything that can go wrong did. I I realized more recently this is something that just as more of a revelation uh, in the past year. I think the reason why I was so vulnerable to my ego and narcissism and everything else was because the planet or the planets I came from before I came to Earth, emotions were not, had been phased out to the point where they weren't controlling things in these beings' lives. Um, they still existed, but it was more like I call it the Vulcan planets. Like it was more about logic and using your brain to overcome things. So it was more logic than emotion based thinking. And so I didn't have really an idea of how powerful human emotions can be compared to where I came from. And so when I had so many temptations and so many um, things around me that just seemed like, oh wow, I want some of that. I want some of that over here. I want that over here. All that temptation was around me 24/7 in this place that I was in New York. I was a banking person. I grew up with a math like I was a math genius as a kid, and my father was a former banker in New York. And when he realized that I was a math genius, even smarter than he ever had been, he when I got to be out of high school, at that time, if you wanted to go into banking, you didn't go to college for it. You apprenticed yourself to someone in the industry, and they taught you the ropes from the ground up. And so he apprenticed me to a guy that he had taught, so like his protege, so to speak, in New York City. And where I grew up was this little town about an hour or so north of the city where a lot of people retired to at that particular time. You're talking about, I was born, if you can imagine the first lifetime, I was born in around the mid to late 1690s, lived till the mid 1770s. So that was a pretty decently long life, especially at that time. Second life began almost immediately afterwards. I was born in the 1790s and lived to the 1840s. So that was a shorter life. And then the last life, I was born in 1900 exactly. It was either Indiana or Iowa. I remember that. And it ended in early 1918 before, when I was still 17 years old. So I would turn 18 that November. I died, I think, in March. Um, but with this second life, like I said, I didn't understand how strong human emotions were, and I think that's why I was vulnerable to them. And so my ego and narcissism were in overdrive, and I didn't know how to control it. And so I immediately veered off. As soon as I got into this world, I veered off my path so far that I couldn't even see it anymore. And instead of helping people by getting them loans to get out of debt or to put their kids into college or home loans so they can get their home to pass through their family, I was using my skills to set up loans that would look good to the higher ups, would earn them a lot of money, and the people would think are good loans, but then would uh, they had terms that would kick in later on that would screw them over. It would help the bank. It would make the bank money, but it would screw over their customers. And I did this, and I also was embezzling money from this bank on the side because I had the ability to do that. Um, at the time there's no computers, so it's even today you can still do it if you're a good hacker, but you didn't have to be at that point. Um, but I made enough money through these two things that I was doing, one above board, one under the table, that I was able to afford a three-story condo style house in the Upper East Side, which was like the Upper West Side is today. This place everybody wanted to live in New York at that time. And I had an apartment in the Greenwich Village area that I rented out, and it's where I had parties where I would invite like the top politicians, business world people, people that I was making money for on the side, or people that they who wanted to get hooked up with me to have me help them make money on the side, and none of this was legal, none of it. So, but basically, what ended up happening, and this is the part that I knew about was what I was seeing, but what I wasn't seeing or didn't see back then, but saw during this life review, was all the families that I heard, the families that got evicted from their homes, the mother and father, where the father had, was robbing people or stealing from stores trying to get money or food to feed his family, or ended up in at the time debtors prisons were still a thing. They weren't outlawed until 1833, I believe. So you're talking about 1820s. They were still in existence. It was a thing we brought over from Europe. And thank God we outlawed. Um, where they basically created almost an indentured servitude in these prisons, and so a lot of men ended up in there. The wives ended up on their own, or they got divorced to so they could survive somewhere else. They had to leave. Kids got left behind because they didn't have the amount of money to feed them or take care of them. So like hundreds of these kids ended up on the streets in the cold winter cold, summer heat, suffering, starving to death, suffering from heat exhaustion, suffering from from exposure in the winter, couldn't keep warm, and I was having to see and feel every single one of them. And I remember there was this one boy that his face still sticks with me every time I close my eyes. Is this one boy that I remember he was in an alleyway and he was looking at his reflection in a pane of glass that was, like doors somebody left there, just junk. But the angle, like I was seeing it from the angle he was seeing from. And to me, it felt like he was staring into my soul. And it broke me in ways that I cannot describe to you. Like, I screamed out, like, please make this stop. I can't take anymore. Get me out of this thing. And I heard my guide's voice, that same sadness to it. You asked to see this. This is what you have to see. You asked, you wanted to know why. This is why. And I'm sorry, but we can't stop this. You have to see it through. And so I had to see all these kids, and so that one boy always sticks with me. It was like, you remember those commercials back in the 80s for UNICEF, like the Ethiopia kids who had to bloated stomachs and couldn't. They were so weak they couldn't even brush flies away from their mouths or their eyes, and they would use that to raise money for UNICEF. Imagine that, but being those kids. That was what it was like for me to go through, and I had to see this hundreds of times. I had to see all these fathers who were broken down, who were good people, and his only crime was crossing paths with me, and who ended up in debtors' prisons or Sing Sing, which was brand new at the time, real prison. And luckily, let's say luckily, about 20 years into this, I was finally caught by somebody or a team of somebodies who thankfully were smarter than I was. And they held this big old trial. It made the news all over the city. Everybody knew about it because like I said, all the people in the business world, the politicians, everybody knew who I was. So as soon as my name made the front page, they knew what was going on, and a lot of them ended up losing millions of dollars or going to prison themselves for some of the lower down. Like there's a lot of people who made deals to keep themselves out of prison, like people still do today if they have enough money. Um, but this trial lasted, I want to say, 3 months. And during that, my wife divorced me, took our two kids, and went, I think, to California, but I'm not sure. I know she disappeared out of my life, never saw her or the kids again. They wanted nothing to do with me because they were getting death threats from people every single day as soon as they found out that she was my wife and they were my kids. Like they were, because they couldn't get to me, they were going after her and them. And so they just wanted to get as far away from New York as they possibly could get. And I don't blame them one bit. I would have done the same. And I ended up getting convicted of everything that they threw at. I mean, they threw the book at me. I ended up going to Sing Sing. It would have been basically a life sentence at that point. But uh, I think 3 years in, I was working in the prison laundry at the time. There were three guys, all of whom fathers from families that I destroyed, who happened to be in the prison at the same time and recognized me immediately because they I guess they'd seen me or seen me from the paper or something like that, seen drawings in the paper of what I look like, and they came after me in the laundry with homemade shivs, which are like prison knives, and stabbed me to death. And at the time, people who were prisoners or indigent, in other words, poor, didn't have their family didn't have money to bury them, they were mostly taken out to a place called Hart Island, which is in the middle of Long Island Sound. For anyone who lives in that area, they're probably familiar with Hart Island. And there's an area of that called Potter's Field, and that's where they used to bury the indigent and the prisoners and people with no names. So there's a lot of unmarked graves in this place, and it's a kind of a landmark today, but back then it was where all the bodies were shipped, the ones that nobody cared about. And so I went from being on top of society to being this unmarked grave in the middle of nowhere. And it was like the biggest turnaround, but that's why I died relatively young in that life compared to the one before it, because I was killed in my early 50s. But when I came back to the other side from that lifetime, I immediately felt like I need to do something about this. I need to fix this. My soul was crying out, please fix this. Like I could feel it. It was like this burning sensation inside of me. Like it felt like I was going to melt. It was so powerful. And it was the only time I remember feeling pain on the other side. The only time. I felt this deep, overwhelming pain. Like I couldn't even put words to it. And so my first thought was, well, I took lives. I'll just give mine. So I crafted this third lifetime where I went back, and at the time World War I was happening in the early 1910s. so 1914 to 18. And towards the end of World War One, there was a massive worldwide epidemic called the Spanish flu. For those who are familiar with that time period, which is like our COVID, a few years back, but on a much worse scale, killed millions. And so I had myself get this Spanish flu and die at 17 and thought, oh, I basically patted myself on the back. Congratulations, you fixed it. You're good. Went back to the other side. Nothing was fixed. In fact, if anything, all of it was worse. And I was panicking. If I had been in a body, I would have been hyperventilating. Didn't know what I could do. And that's when I found out this area that I've mentioned earlier where people confuse it with hell. There's an area on the other side where beings who either feel like they need to be punished for something because they've been taught they need to be, or they just are so bad off they believe they deserve it, or believe they don't deserve the light and love that comes from God slash source, will separate from other beings on the other side and put themselves into this area that is dark and dreary and miserable. And it's it's like I call it the misery echo chamber, because what they feel in this place is every mistake they've ever made being reflected back at them from every direction. You screwed this up, you messed that up, and it's constantly barraging them. But it's by their own design, it's by their own choice. Like, God does not do this to them. No being on the other side does this to them. They do it to themselves because they feel like they deserve it. So as soon as they figure out that this is not the way things have to be, as soon as they make the decision mentally, or whatever you want to call it, as soon as they make the decision, I don't belong here, they can leave that place just as quick as they got into it. But I thought, this is where I deserve to be, because I just tried what I thought was the ultimate sacrifice. I sacrificed my whole life and nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. Well, what else is there? I might as well put myself here. At least there, I'll, I'll be be punishing myself, but at least it's something. I'll feel like something's coming out of it. But thankfully, I went to my guide first, and I told him what had been happening, and he immediately stopped me. And he said, "Do not do that." And I said, "Why? I've run out of ideas. I don't have anything else. What else can I do?" And he said, "The reason why none of what you're doing is working is because you're not thinking about the beings you hurt. You're not thinking about them. You're thinking about yourself. I want to end my pain. I want to make myself feel better. I want to fix my problem the way I'm feeling. That's all you're thinking about is you. And as long as you're thinking selfish thoughts, doing something productive cannot happen. It will not work." And I said, "Well, if that's the case, what do I do?" And he said, "There's only one thing you can do." And he said, "It's called living a life of atonement." And I asked him what that was. He said, "When what you have to do is you choose to go back to Earth, and you choose to live a life that has the equivalent pain and suffering to what you caused others in your previous lifetime. It's not about an eye for an eye. It's not about getting vengeance. It's not about suffering. It's about understanding that pain hurts, that what you do hurts others. If you're not helping them, you're harming them. And if you're harming them, it has consequences. That, you're not just doing this in a vacuum. And so we do this as a lesson to teach us that, when you harm other beings, you're harming them, but you're also harming yourself. And that's why, so the atonement is partly this going through pain and suffering, but he said that's only part one. He said the other part is you can't just let yourself feel that pain and then lash out at people. Like some people will have that misery loves company attitude where, I feel like crap, I'm hurting, so I'm going to make everyone around me hurt. You can't do that. You have to choose to internalize that pain and suffering all the way to your soul, and then you have to choose to convert it into compassion, empathy, and sympathy for other beings. And he said that is the hardest lesson that any being can learn when they've had a life of harm, is to understand that that harm has consequences. And so you have to experience those consequences in order to overcome them. You have to understand that what you're doing, it affects other people, but also affects you. So this way, when you go through this two-part process of atonement, you will understand why you can't do this again. And he says it's rare that a being will go through that process of atonement. And it can take multiple lifetimes. It depends on the being. I mean, someone like Hitler probably had multiple lifetimes he's going to have to go through to overcome that much harm. I mean, I was a harmful person, but I don't even hold a candle to that guy. Um, but I did find out last year around October from talking to him that that particular goal, I've achieved it finally. But and I remember he asked me. He said, and he kind of knew what the answer was going to be. He said, "Is that really going to change anything for you?" And I said, "No, I don't want to change." I said, "Because this is who I am in this life, at least. This is who I am. I want to be the person that helps other people. I understand I'm in pain, but now I know why I'm in pain. I know why I'm suffering. And so for me, it doesn't feel the same as somebody who's just suffering blindly. To know why you're doing something. I feel like it has a purpose. So, um, but anyway, so once I got done with that separate life review, I really I needed a break. Like even in my energy based form, my energy felt like it was almost gone. I felt like I was as dead as you could be, and I actually felt the pain of this experience for the first time. And so I found myself back in that same place in Switzerland. I stayed longer this time, but then I just I had the urge to get away. Like I need to be somewhere alone. I need to I need to get out of here. I need to see something else, to something beautiful to remind me why I'm doing this, why I'm going through this. And so I went back out into space, but this time I didn't stop here. I kept going. I ended up exploring the whole galaxy and parts of Andromeda too, which is 2 million light years away. Um, I saw evidence of multiple other species. You could see, like, we're obviously intelligent made structures, that were not created naturally. I also met two species, one of which I found out uh, kind of during the process of meeting them and speaking to them. This was the species my guide belonged to in his previous incarnation. He has seen me in this incarnation, on Earth, the last four lifetimes, including this one, and he wanted me to know him the same way. And so that experience, I think, brought us closer. Like, if you can imagine someone being the ultimate brother and um, soulmate in one being. Like, people think of soulmate and they think of like romantic soulmate. Soulmate has nothing to do with romance. It's it's the ultimate closeness that two beings can share, and it can be just as platonic as any friendship or brother, sister, anything like that. He and I are closer now than I think we've ever been. This past year, especially, we've been in constant contact, and he has helped me so much this year. Um, but Anyway, so I saw his species. I saw where they came from. I saw where they went to. This I saw the planet where their planet. There was two species they ran into. One, their planet got wiped out by the star going supernova. That was his species. The other one, their planet was basically left uninhabitable when what's called a gamma ray burst, or GRB, from the formation of a black hole. When a black hole first forms, it shoots out these gamma ray bursts from the two poles. And so anything caught within dozens of light years of that place in the path of those two beams is left uninhabitable. If it hit Earth, it would wipe out your atmosphere, magnetic field. It would leave us completely unprotected from the solar wind, and you'd have nothing to. There would be nothing left. Um, so that's what happened to this planet. But they both had time. Like the first one, they knew the life of their star. They were scientifically advanced, so they knew that the end of their star was coming. The other one, they saw the black hole formation. It was, I think, maybe a dozen so light years away, and so they had time to see this or to know this GRB was coming, and to gather their ships together. And the way their ships were, this one particular species, they were able to link together in orbit into this one giant ship. Like, if you can imagine, the biggest moon in our solar system is actually Ganymede, not our moon. It's Ganymede. It's a moon of Jupiter. Um, this ship combined was bigger than that moon. It was longer, like the diameter, the whole length that was bigger than the diameter of this moon. Um, and their entire species was on it. And what I found out was they had traveled around looking for another system to call home, but had spent hundreds of years doing so. And by the time they got somewhere else, they had gone through multiple generations. So a lot of the newer beings were born on the ship, lived their whole lives on the ship. And so for them, this was home. And so there was a decision made at one point, like, do we want to park it and set up camp on this planet here, or do we want to keep exploring? And the decision was made to keep exploring. So they are permanent explorers of space, at least for the time being, anyway. Whereas my guide species, they were, one thing I will say, the more advanced species, once they get above a certain level of evolution, they have a direct connection to the other side. So for us, where our guides are more of an esoterical thing, for them, it's more like you and I talking. Like, they can see them, they can talk to them, they can, get guidance directly from them. There's no space in between. For them, the veil doesn't exist. It's just direct connection. So they were guided to this other system. I don't know. I don't remember how many light years away it was, but it was like, if you can imagine, this is us, this is the other side of the galaxy, and they were going around this way towards where we are. So, like, if you can imagine, that's north, this is south. They were going east around the galaxy, direction that it spins, and they ended up in this system that had has what are called, I guess, on our planet, scientists would call them Dyson spheres. And what they are is a series. It can either be a solid structure, but more likely it's a series of satellites that form a globe. And what they're meant for is to put around a star near the end of its life, to gather all the ambient energy from this star, where none of it gets lost, and it can be used to power an entire civilization. Instead of just letting all that go off into space, it's gathered by collectors on these satellites. And so what it turns out, there was a species that had lived there over 2 billion years ago that had created this Dyson sphere around the star, but that also created a bigger one. If you can imagine our solar system, the first one would have been around the orbit of Venus. The second one would have been around the orbit of Jupiter, so hundreds of millions of miles further out, so way bigger. And this one, what they discovered was the inner one was for the star while it was in its current phase. It was like a what they call a main sequence star, like our sun, yellow, like a yellow star. But at the mass that it's at, it's slightly bigger than ours. But there's a range that where the star at the end of its life will expand into what's called a red giant, much bigger. Like ours will eventually just engulf Venus, maybe even Earth, before shrinking to what's called a white dwarf, which is basically the core, and it's maybe the size of New York City. Um, so the second set of collectors is for when it reaches its red giant phase. So they already planned ahead for this, and so they had these two Dyson spheres, and in between them were four planets, one of which was unlivable, the innermost one. It was like Mercury. It was a rocky world, and almost it had one side that almost always faced the star, and the other side almost always never did. So it was unlivable. The other three were like the second one out was like our American Southwest. Uh, Decently hot, but it was a desert world. It had a lot of rocky, used the rocks and caves and other natural structures, and they built their civilization to work with the environment. In other words, use the caves, use the rocks to make their structures out of, and to build them into it. Then the third planet and fourth planet were the ones that were more like most of Earth, where it's I think the fourth one was bigger, but it was also lower gravity, like where they came from, and so it was the one where the mass majority of their species went to. And so this planet happened to be covered with a system of trees that were all linked together across the entire planet. In fact, if you've seen the movie Avatar, yeah, the one Jim Cameron did, it's very much like that, like home tree. But imagine that, like they have this system of trees that are all connected to each other through their roots, and the underside of this is a very porous. It's not a solid rocky world like Earth is. It's very porous. There's actually whole giant cave systems underneath the ground that they've explored. Um, and so the core is much smaller than like the overall size of the planet is huge compared to how big the core is. Whereas Earth, it's a lot, lot closer. And so this has a much lower mass, and lower mass means lower gravity. So that's why they're comfortable there, because they're 9 or 10 feet tall. If they were on Earth's gravity, they wouldn't be able to hardly move. So they needed a place with low gravity. But what I saw was a bunch of them in these little what I call jump ships that are about the size of like a short bus, like a school bus, like a short, maybe I don't know, 15, 20 feet long, and it held two beings per ship. And what they did is they would use these ships to um, fix and maintain the different satellites that made up these two Dyson spheres. And so there was a whole volunteer force of beings from this species that would do this, and that's the way they made their living. And my guide was one of the two that I ran into. He was showing me telepathically his life, and he showed me how he and his father, I'm sorry, not his father, his parent, because they're an asexual species. They don't procreate like we do. To have They have a sac on their backs that will, with the addition of genetic material, will gestate a another one, like almost a clone of them, and it'll gestate for 3 months, and then will spawn as another being. So they have one parent. It could be male or female. They do have both sexes still, It's something that they'll eventually phase out, evolutionary wise, but it's something that's it's still part of their society. But you can have a parent that's female or male. It doesn't matter. Either one can create. So it's like certain frogs on our planet do this. And so he and his parent, who was a male, um, had a falling out at one point. His father was his parent was very traditional, believed that they should all stay on this planet. They should, you know, the fruits that these trees created were what everyone subsisted off of. He felt like his child should join him in getting these fruits and should be content to live on the planet and never leave it like he did. But he that's why the reason why he and I are so simpatico is both of us love to explore. Both of us love space. He was always obsessed with it. His eyes were always like I remember like Yoda described Luke Skywalker, eyes always on the horizon, never where you are, never what you're doing, always out there. That's the way he and I both are. Like we're always looking over the horizon, like what's next, what's out there. And so he was never content to stay on the planet. And so he and his parent had an argument. He joined several of his friends, um, at first going on these jump ships to service these satellites. And he figured that would keep him close enough to home where if his father wanted to patch things up, so to speak, that he would be close enough by to come by. And then eventually he would leave on one of their exploration ships to, go further out into space. But while he was doing this, his parent had an accident where he lost his grip. What happened over millions of years that they were on this planet is they developed this almost prehensile grip on their front limbs, their arms, and their feet, so they could grip the limbs of these trees, and almost like a an ape or an orangutan would have. And so I guess he lost his grip and fell a really. I mean, these trees on this planet grow like the lowest ones grow a quarter mile high. So a lot of these where the bunch of them grow together, they grow in like a corkscrew shape. They can grow miles into the sky. So he was a good couple miles up when he lost his grip, fell all the way down, and died. And when my guide found this out, it broke him, and he felt like they left things unsaid and unresolved. And his species is the way that they're unlike ours in one particular way, in that death for them is more of a choice, where they have a long lifespan, but if you feel like you don't want to be alive anymore, you want to try something else, you don't feel like your life is going the way you wish it would, you have the option to take your life at any time, and it's respected in their society. It's actually their life is celebrated. All their accomplishments are listed on their at their burial site or wherever they choose to be. Like some of them get cremated, like we do, um, and so their accomplishments and their contributions to the society are honored even after their physical death. And he chose to die because he felt like his obsession with space had somehow led to his father's death, even though one had nothing to do with the other. It felt like that to him, and so he died, and he's been on the other side ever since. And that's when he became a guide. Uh, I guess ran across me and became my guide. So
Nice.
he and I
Well,
have been linked ever since.
can you go back to or go to the next part where you understand what's coming for the planet?
Right. For the humanity, you mean?
Humanity, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, first of all, things are going to get worse before they get better. We're already in the midst of that, as you can tell. I mean, this right now, the way things are, it's about as bad as they've gotten in my lifetime, at least. And I mean, I've been alive since the early '70s, so things have to get worse before they get better. Because unfortunately, the people who are the rich and the powerful, the people at the top who control everything, things have to start affecting them first before things can start changing, because they control where things go and they control the poor by using their fear and their inability to do things because they don't have money as ways to manipulate and control them. And so they have to be directly affected by their own actions somehow. And right now they're not being affected. So things have to get bad enough where they're affected. And then once they're affected, things start to change very quickly because they get motivated to want to change versus keep things as they are. Once they once things start to change, it goes very quickly. Now you're talking. This is not like, well, this is going to happen by the end of this year or the end of this decade or hey, sometime in your lifetime. Like so many people make these false promises, and it drives me absolutely insane when they say like, well, by December 31st, this big thing's going to happen. No, it's not like that at all. These problems that we have as a society, as a species, took hundreds of years to create. They do not go away overnight. They take just as long to fix, if not longer. So you're talking about hundreds of years that this process is going to be going on from where we are right now to where things are going to be. So that's the first thing. And I want to make sure people understand that it's not going to be happening in your lifetimes. I don't care who's watching this. It won't be in your lifetime. I don't care if you're 5 years old or 100. So that's number one. Number two, the idea is once we start, like, how to put this. Okay, so first of all, imagine all species are on a scale of 1 to 100, where one is you're basically barely out of the caves, and 100 is as close to God slash source as you can possibly get as a being. So every being in the universe is on this scale. Um, the area between 30 and 40 on that scale is where transitions happen. Like uh, the beings who are in the 30s, they're just about to transition. They just started to move towards it. You can see it in the distance. It's coming. And then 40s is where they've actually transitioned, and that's when they're able to start developing telepathic abilities. They're able to make more direct connections with the other side. Things that we have to die to do now, they'll be able to do while they're alive. And this is the way like most species in the universe fall between 40 and 80 on that scale. So they're already evolved to a certain degree, and some are way evolved. Um, then I'd say the other 15 to 20% is split almost evenly between the top 20 and the bottom 40. And most of it's in the bottom 40. And that includes us. We're like, on that scale, we're at like a 25, if you want to have a number. We're still a good ways away from our transition phase, but we're at the beginning. And that's why there's so many people being sent back from near death experiences, more so now than ever, is because getting humanity prepared for that transition, getting their mentality prepared for that is the biggest goal right now. And that's what we're here for, is to help them help them mentally transition before they physically transition. And so once you uh, beings once you get past 40, they're able to develop telepathy, they get contact with the other side. But um, the transition that every species has to go through, and everyone goes through it at some point in their evolution. For them, for other beings, this is considered an honor to assist a species through its transition. It's the greatest honor that any species can have because evolving is the whole point. It's becoming better beings, becoming more connected, exploring, being connected to the universe and to each other, helping not just your own species, but other species. That's the whole goal. That's what we're here for. And so, literally, right now, there are millions of us, and I say us because I'm one of them, beings who came from other places to here to pick to help in that transition. That's why, if you think about it, it took the entirety of human history from the Neanderthal and Homo, whatever, way back in the, way back millions of years ago, took that entirety of history from then until 1950 for the population of the world to reach 3 billion. It has taken, it took only 25 years for that to double. And it's taken almost another 25 for it to triple. We're at 8.3 billion people right now in 2025 versus 3 billion in 1950. That's a lifetime that we've almost tripled how many people are here. Now, all those extra bodies are not a coincidence, and they're not by accident. They are intentional. They're to give a place for these beings coming from other worlds to incarnate. Because in order to take part in the transition, in order to help a species through it, you have to become one of them. And I liken it to there's a scene from Superman 2, if you've ever seen that movie, where Superman is getting ready to give up his powers. He wants to marry Lois Lane and get married to her. And his mother basically her image comes to him and says, if you want to live your life as immortal, or no, I'm sorry, if you want to live your life with immortals, you have to live your life as immortal. You have to become one of them. And it's just like that for beings who come here to become part of that transition. You have to incarnate as a human. You have to be, you have to forget the other side, just like we do. You have to choose to come into this limited body. You have to be susceptible to the same, like I was susceptible to my ego and narcissism 2 lifetimes ago. All the emotional baggage that comes with being a human being. We have to be part of it because in order to fix it, we have to understand it from the inside out. And so there are millions of us. I'm not far from the only one, and I'm not even close to the top of that. I'm like, if I was in a bee colony, I'd be a worker bee. Okay, I'm just a normal guy. Um, but there are millions of us out there, and a lot of us have had near-death experiences. So more than likely, if you've had a near-death experience, you're one of us because we're the ones that are sent back who see and understand what the other side is like, who understand that there's a greater purpose that we're aiming towards, and who are sent back to help move us in that direction, who are here to help people understand that death is not something to be feared, that it's something to celebrate.
Can I ask you 2 questions about this?
Sure, go ahead.
So here are the 2 questions. Number one, did you see anything about what's happening at this time in your future vision of AI, artificial intelligence? And number two, if we're coming to evolve humanity and we're becoming a human in this lifetime, are there still, like your guide, beings that are on other planets that are coming in their form to also assist us?
Partially, it's not exactly the same thing. Like I'll give you an example. There are 12 species from other planets right now that are watching us telepathically.
And
They
can you
are.
name them?
I don't know their names. They're, a lot of species have a, or either have evolved so much that they don't require a body anymore, so they only speak telepathically, or they're like, I'll give you an example. My guide, his species has several physical structures in their body that makes certain sounds that are part of their names, part of their language, like a bird would have, that we can't imitate because we don't have those parts.
Makes
So
sense.
I can't pronounce his name. I can't say his species name because I don't have those parts to do it.
Got it.
So, but I know there's a dozen species watching us. They are able to watch from any distance. Telepathy does not have a limit. It's not um, like radio communication or even light speed communication. Like we communicate with people on the moon, and it takes a few minutes for the reply to come back. Telepathy is instantaneous, and there's no limit to it. You can communicate telepathically from the other side of the galaxy easily. So they're able to keep an eye on us from a distance. They do that intentionally so that we don't see them and know that they're doing this. But their purpose in watching over us is twofold. One, to make sure we don't destroy ourselves, either through war or environmental destruction or whatever the case might be. And what they do in those cases, like the Cuban Missile Crisis is a perfect example, they telepathically guide certain key people to work together where they've been at each other's throats before. Like they got JFK, his brother Robert, um, Nikita Khrushchev, the Russian envoy who came to the United States, um, what's his name, the ambassador to Russia that we had. Just a bunch of people that were involved at higher levels in that particular crisis, who managed to find just the right words at just the right time to avert it. They're
Sense.
not allowed. They're not allowed to directly intervene with our species. It's like the galactic version of Star Trek's Prime Directive, where they're not allowed to interfere with a species development past a certain point. If they want to, if they want to intervene in any way, they have to do it in a subtle, telepathic way from a distance. They can't just come in and say, "We're going to save you all. We're the aliens. We're here." They have to do it telepathically through us.
So, what do you make of the people who are saying that we're ready to have an event where the aliens are showing themselves, or right now they're saying, I'm in contact with this alien species, I'm seeing this, I've been abducted, like whatever it is? What do you make of all of that?
Honestly, I think a lot of them. I will say there are people who are in contact with some of these species, so that much is true. As far as people being abducted, that's attention seeking. I mean,
Well, or do you
they
think
don't
it's our
abduct
own
people.
government doing things, because there are a lot of people who have,
Well, yeah, but our government, we're human. We're screwed up.
right,
These
right,
other species aren't. They've evolved past this crap.
exactly,
So they're
exactly.
not abducting us. They're not performing experiments. They're not sticking stuff up our butts. Okay, they're just not doing that. So this whole idea of people being abducted and experimented on is just a bunch of hooey.
What about
Uh,
the AI? Did you see anything about artificial intelligence in that life future review?
to a degree, I saw that there was going to be a significant development in technology. That part of it was going to. I didn't know that it was called AI, but I knew that there was going to be something that was going to be a potential issue in our evolution. And the reason why I say that is because it can be manipulated by people with an agenda to create a scene. Like we can do stuff right now. I've seen videos on YouTube just today, as a matter of fact, where it looks like an actual court case happening in a real court, and the entire thing was created by AI. None of it was real. It was just somebody's imagination put in a video. So we can create things that look, sound, and act real. Um, and that is a problem if you have somebody with a nefarious agenda and that kind of ability. Because I mean, there's people right now who are fooled by false narratives that are actually happening. Things that are actually true, but just they're being manipulated by them right now. So you can imagine with somebody with an agenda and a thing that can create a false narrative would be able to do with people in that mindset where they want to believe a certain thing is true. And so you create something that fits that and use that to manipulate them. So AI is a wonderful tool in the right hands. But that's true of most things that are man made.
True.
You
Yeah.
know, nuclear power can either power our cities or wipe them out,
Right, right.
you
So
know?
do you think then, did you see evidence that we make it? We evolve enough to be one before we destroy the planet,
Oh,
destroy
yeah.
ourselves. We do.
No,
That's good
we
news.
will not destroy the planet or ourselves. Like I said, they will telepathically guide enough people in the right positions to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. They've already done it with the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's the
Okay.
perfect. That's why I brought that up because that was one of the examples that was shown to me as an example of when they have interfered telepathically and brought us down back from the brink because
This is
we would have
great.
had no World War III if they hadn't intervened. That's
I
how
love
close.
that you're sharing this because I think this gives people hope because right now there is a lot of fear-based information coming out in the spiritual community saying that this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And some of it's a little bit scary. See anything similar to that that you can share with us about what's coming for the whole group of humanity?
I can share with you what's coming because it's not a big secret. We're allowed
Okay.
to talk about it.
Okay.
Uh, First of all, once we the uh, the stuff starts to affect the rich and the powerful, and they start to act in a way to make things better finally, instead of using them for their own advantage all the time. Um, what the first thing that starts happening? There are three things that humanity as a whole has to evolve away from. Because let me give you an analogy. Let's say you break your leg, okay? You've got a hip to toe cast and you're on crutches. Well, maybe when you come back, things still hurt a little bit. Maybe you're out of the cast, but your leg still hurts, and you can't quite figure it out. And so maybe you stay on those crutches a little bit longer than you should. And so I call it a crutch, something that you do that you don't need to do, but you do it because it's just convenient. It's easier for a little while to not have to deal with as much pain. And so there are three major crutches that we as humanity use to basically assign all of our, like, the stuff we don't understand, um, the stuff that we don't want to deal with, and these are things that are used on a daily basis to manipulate us, to control us, and to separate us. That's the big one. Because separating us into little individual groups of poor people and turning us on each other is how the rich and powerful keep getting away with the crap that they've been doing. Because they keep us fighting each other instead of fighting them. And so we have to give up these crutches. First of all, politics, the political structure of control has to be let go. We do not need rich and powerful controlling the rest of us anymore. And that has to go. Second one, and tied directly to that, money. The monetary systems of valuing things and saying, well, this is worth more than that because, I say so. Or your life is worth more than this person's life because you have $1 billion and they only, make minimum wage. Valuing things and valuing people is the one of the worst cancers of humanity. And so money has to go. And the last one and the hardest one to get rid of, and goes for every species, don't get me wrong, it's not just us, religion, organized religion, or the idea of putting onto an invisible being that you can't see, you can't prove the existence of, everything that you don't understand, everything that you don't like, saying that making out like this being agrees with your mindset, like what I think is what this being thinks. We have this whole thing about God created man in his image, but what we've done for the last 2,000 years is create him in ours. We've made him into this angry, vengeful, punishing being who wants to smite everybody and save one family that happens to be righteous and wants to test everybody to make sure they're loyal to him, and he wants you to pray 20 times a day, and he needs your money. Oh God, he needs your money all the time. God source does not need a damn thing. This being is so far beyond us that it's ridiculous to even try to put him in the same box. God source is a being that created the universe and everything in it. All the beauty and the wonder and the amazement, all from everything from the quantum particles that you can't see to the giant galaxies that you can. All that was created by this being. And that includes all of us. And to imagine that this being who could create that is some vengeful thing that only cares about this one little tiny crap mudball planet on the outskirts of nowhere, in the middle of an ordinary galaxy in the middle of nowhere, and only cares about us as a species and doesn't care about anything else in the whole universe but us, is absolutely ridiculous in the extreme. This being loves all of us, all beings everywhere on every planet that's ever existed, ever exists now, and ever will exist. And so, this idea of using, and the problem is, religion was originally meant to be a way to bring people together, to inspire them to do better and be better, to help each other out. It was supposed to be the bridge. And instead, just like everything else that's man made, we've perverted it into a weapon. We've weaponized religion against each other. And that's what we've been doing for the last several thousand years. I mean, you think about almost every war that we've ever had has had religion at its core somewhere, whether either it's directly caused by it or it had something to do with it. Christians did the go crusades, and the Muslims, wanted to. They had genocide in Bosnia, where Muslims and another group were killing each other. Um, so this whole thing where religion has become a weapon and it's become a way to separate us into groups of us versus them, where we where us has all the answers, us is always in the right, us always knows everything, and them is always the bad guys, them is always the ones we gotta punish and convert over to our way of thinking, or they have to die. That is our mindset as a human, as a species, and that's gotta go. It's the only way we evolve is to get rid of those three things. And so those three crutches are the first things that have to go. And eventually, it takes a while. I won't lie to you. I won't pretend like it happens fast. It takes a while because we're so addicted to them now. It's like a drug. We need them. We can't live. We can't imagine our lives without them anymore. So we have to. Giving them up is not easy. But once we do that, that's when we make that jump from the 30s to the 40s, as far as that 1 to 100 scale that I described earlier. That's when we start developing as a species. We start realizing we're not alone. We start realizing we're in this together, and what we do to one, we do to all. We start acting as a unified species for the first time, where it's not about what country you're from, what color your skin is, what sex you are. We realize that all this is superficial garbage.
That's a
None of it
mic
matters.
drop. That's a mic drop right there, Andrew.
It really, I mean, it's true. If you
Yes.
think about it, when you leave your body, what do you take with you? Do you take a cent of your money? No. Do you take any of the things that you gather over your lifetime? No. Do you take your race, your sex, your skin color, your country of origin? No. You take the energy based being that is in the middle of it. And that being has no sex, no race, no country of origin. It is just you. And that being is one thing we got to realize, and more than anything, the biggest part of it is this lifetime is not it. It's not all of us, our lifetimes. We have thousands of them each. And so what you are in this life, you're not going to be in the next one. You weren't in the last one. I've been male, I've been female, I've been neuter, I've been alien, I've been human. And that's just me. Everybody's like that. So this whole idea that what you are right now is who you always have been and always will be is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
absolutely ridiculous. So we start to understand this. Finally, we understand that that we are that we're connected to each other and that we need to act as such instead of acting as separated beings, acting for our own interests.
Yes.
And once we do that, oh, you want to talk about things moving quickly? They move so fast that within a lifetime, a single lifetime, even on our scale, um, you have humanity jump from a maybe mid 30s, almost at that transition phase, to close to 50 in a lifetime.
Wow.
And you're talking about telepathy starts developing. Um, you start having like we've had beings that have come at different points in history who have been really inspirational beings. Like people talk about Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha. Um,
Ascended masters.
yeah, Martin Luther King. Yeah, even people in modern eras. Anybody who has led lots of people in an inspirational direction. Gandhi, another one. So there are thousands of them throughout history, and they're big and small. They're not always the famous people that you know the names of. It could be little people that maybe came and just led a group and got them over the hump. But you start to see a lot more of those. And I mean, I mean, like instead of one or two a generation, you might have hundreds of them all over the
Well, and
world.
they were already coming in, Andrew, because we've had lots of
Exactly.
discussions on this channel about the autistic, nonverbal kids who are proving that telepathy is real and they're having
Hmm.
conversations with their close loved ones, with their friends, and with others like them across the world. So it's
Right.
coming. It's coming.
We're already discovering parts of what's coming. We can see the signs of it. It's like you're driving down the road and you see your destination in the distance, and there's a sign you pass by. It says this place you're going to 50 miles. Oh, this place 40 miles. This place 30 miles. You can see you're getting closer and closer to it, but you can see these signs. You can see that you're getting closer to it. That's what we're sensing. We
That's a
sense the
wonderful
future coming.
analogy. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so Andrew, I know that when you were on the other side, we said in the very beginning of the interview that you were on the other side for what was the equivalent of 12 Earth years. And you said that you spent 5 of those learning only 2 things. So will you
Right.
explain to us what they had you kind of masterclass concentrate in on the other side?
So basically, I spent 5 years traveling around the galaxy, and when I came back, the there was two things that were really focused on by a lot of beings. One was the future of humanity because I'm being part of it. I that's what I was feeling was a lot of that, the work on the transition of humanity, and then the other thing was how the universe works.
Hmm.
And so, as far as humanity goes, if you've ever been behind the scenes of a movie or seen the behind the scenes of one, there's a thing called a storyboard that they do for movies where what they do is they will storyboard every scene. It shows like what camera angles we want to use, what action is happening in the scene, who's taking part in it, what exactly is going to happen. It's all drawn out in an artistic form as far as what's going to happen in that scene. And they have these storyboards laid out on this big old board for the whole movie, and then they have it all planned out, and so they have people that just do this. But anyway, what I saw was like a storyboard but it was interactive. In other words, I could say, okay, I want to check out this part over here. I could mentally kind of reach out to that, and next thing I knew, I was living in it. Like I could see what was actually coming. I could feel like I was part of it. And some parts I actually was part of. Like I know I have, for instance, I know I have either 4 or 5 more lifetimes on Earth during this transition phase, spread out, um, that are coming. Like I've already had 3 before this. This is number 4. I've got 4 or 5 more coming. So several hundred years of lifetimes coming. And when I saw, beyond when the part I described earlier, as far as letting go of those 3 big crutches that we are addicted to as a species: the political control, the monetary valuation system, and our attachment to organized religion as far as controlling people and separating them. Beyond when we let go of those 3 things, when the transition really kicks into high gear, the eventual goal for us as a species is not just to become a unified species, not just to help each other. What they have found, other species have found about us, is there are 2 things that are uniquely human that other species do not have. One is the ability to think outside the box when it comes to solving a problem. In other words, we have the ability to conceive of a lot of different scenarios and which one might work the best. And we can plan this out in our heads in a way that other species is like black or white. We're either going to do this or we're going to do that. And there's no in between. There's no let's think about this phase. There's no brainstorming. Brainstorming is a foreign concept to most of these species. So they use logic more than anything else. The second thing is our ability, our artistic ability, because ours stems from our emotions. Like our emotions give us our music, our art, our um, our buildings, even everything that we've ever created is emotion based. It's something we saw, we had an emotional attachment to, and we manifested in reality. Now, if you imagine we can do that as a human being in our limited bodies, imagine what we can do on the other side with that. You know, that's just an aside. But anyway, so those 2 things specifically are very uniquely human. We have a very big emotional side to us that most other species have evolved away from. They're more logical. They're more matter of fact. Jokes don't really have a lot of meaning for them. So things that we find funny, or prank videos, or anything we find funny, they don't understand funny. It doesn't make any sense to them. And so what happens is we end up becoming teachers of
Hmm.
on a galactic scale. We teach other species how to think outside the box, how to get in touch with their emotions and use them in a positive way. Because we know what it's like to use them in a negative way. We have an entire history to fall back on in that regard. And we'll use that as a teaching tool to say, this is how we do it in a good way, in a positive way. Use our emotions to help each other, to care, to develop our empathy and our sympathy for each other, rather than use them to harm. And so that is humanity's future. I mean, you're talking way in the distance now, Star Trek level, hundreds of years out, thousands of years even. But that's what we're heading for. And when we become evolved enough and we become an internet, the more evolved you become, the more interstellar you become. You're not allowed to we're not allowed to have the knowledge or the technological ability to travel beyond our immediate space until such time as we have evolved enough to not harm other beings. This is something that they do telepathically to all species until they're ready to advance past that point. So, like right now, if we were an interstellar species, we would be all about control, trying to take over a planet or destroy a species we don't agree with. We would be harmful. So, we have to evolve past that before we're going to be allowed to become interstellar. But once we do, we become teachers of
Wow.
other species.
So what else did you learn that like kind of the quick study part about what the universe is all about? How it
Now that's
works.
the fun part. Um, is this part of what I'm about to tell you is something that just played out this past year. I just found out. I just read stuff and it clicked. Um, what I was shown at the time you're talking about the 1978 and 1985 is when I had my two near death experiences. The common knowledge about how the universe works, how it started, what's going to happen to it in the future, how it ends, was pretty much down to two main schools of thought. One was it's going to just keep like in quantum physics, we have just started to develop our knowledge of dark energy and dark matter. Dark energy has the effect of making the universe expand. Dark matter connects things, wants to draw them together. Right? So far, dark energy has been the vast majority of that. And they think that those two together equal about 90 to 95% of all the matter and mass in the universe. That's the current theory. So, what they have proposed so far is that the dark energy will keep going and the universe will keep expanding ad infinitum, um, possibly for trillions of years, until such point as stars start losing all their nuclear fuel, they expend all their fuel, they can't survive, they die or they supernova, but then things are so far apart eventually that those elements that they kick out can't gather enough to form new stars. So you have the star creation starts to also die out as well as the stars themselves. And so what you have is what's called the heat death of the universe, where everything just goes cold and dark over trillions of years. That's one theory. The other theory is eventually the dark energy and dark matter will reach some kind of equilibrium where the universe will stop expanding and start moving in the other direction. And that's called the big crunch, the opposite of the big bang. And then that particular school of thought breaks into two categories when you get to the point of asking what happens to all the mass and energy in the universe when it all comes back together and you can't go any further. One school of thought says the universe will just implode. The other side says all this energy and mass will get shunted off into some kind of alternate universe that we don't know about yet and we can't see and whatever. It's just a theory. The problem is both of those theories and the other one all violate what's called the first law of thermodynamics. For those who are not familiar with that term, I bet you've heard these words before. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed, it can only change form. That is the first law of thermodynamics, otherwise known as conservation of energy. So, all three of those violate it because if the universe implodes, energy doesn't exist anymore. Well, that violates that law. If it gets shunted off into an alternate universe, it's not here anymore. That violates that law. If the universe dies in a heat death and there's nothing left but cold, dark husks, same thing. So they've been looking for a way to explain what happens to the universe that doesn't violate that law. And just in this past year, I think early last year, the first one came about, is a project called DESI, DESI. It stands for Dark Energy Spectroscopic Instrument, if I'm not mistaken. You can look it up, and don't get fooled by DESI as in like Bollywood, because there's a word called DESI that has something to do with Bollywood acting. Um, but if you look up DESI in dark energy spectroscopic instrument, and what it is a ground-based multiple packaging of instruments that are attached to ground-based telescopes. And what it does is measure the level of dark energy in the universe. And it's doing so on a scale never before attempted. And what they expected to find was that the level of dark energy had stayed consistent since the Big Bang, and so has the rate of expansion. That's what they believed since the 70s. They're wrong. And this project showed them that. What it showed was not only is it not consistent, the universe has been slowing down for several billion years already. So dark energy is already lessening. The level is getting less with the passage of time, and dark matter is getting larger. So the
Is this
two
what
of them are
you
getting
saw?
closer.
Is this what you saw when you were on the other side when
This
they
is
were
what I was
showing you?
shown.
Okay, okay.
This is what I was shown. Is it? I mean, the whole dark energy, dark matter. That part was not mentioned, but what I was shown was what the universe was going to do.
Mm.
And what happens is eventually it reaches that equilibrium. So the second part of the second theory is right up till that point. It reaches an equilibrium and starts to contract in that big crunch. But when it reaches the far end, and mass and like matter and mass and energy have all reached the ultimate point where they can't contract anymore. That is where everything breaks down. And what this other theory that I saw later this past year says is that this energy is not going to implode. It's not going to shunt off into an alternate universe, that it actually rebounds off of itself, just like if you can imagine having the unstoppable force and the immovable object. What they always ask that philosophical question: what happens if the two of them meet? Well, one of the answers to that question is the unstoppable force would just get sent in a different direction. It's still unstoppable. It's still moving, and the immovable object hasn't moved, right? So imagine if all the energy and mass in the universe was like those two things: hit each other, rebound. You can't go any further in, they go back out, and guess what that makes? A new Big Bang. Not
Oh.
only that, this theory posits that this has already happened before. And that's
Oh.
the other part I was shown. This is
Hmm.
not the first iteration of the universe, it's the
Hmm.
ninth. 9 times, just like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. 9 times have we done this. So this is the ninth
Oh.
time we've been, and each time the universe is different.
Mm-hmm.
Stars that developed one time don't develop another. Planets, same way. Species, same way. So there's always differences in every iteration of the universe. And the reason for that is so that we can have an infinite number of experiences as beings without end.
So
That's the whole.
that's the purpose, is to have these all of these experiences. It's not necessarily for lessons. It is to have an experience for the joy of the experience.
Well, not just enjoy the experience, but also because every single experience you have adds to you as a being, and that in turn adds to Source. Source experiences its creation through us. So every time we have a new experience, new cool thing happens to us, that Source is just as rejoicing as we are for that.
Right.
And so that's the point, is for us to have all of these infinite experiences over an infinite amount of time with no end to it. The universe is not going to end. If it did, it would violate the first law of thermodynamics. Period. End of story. So it
Wow.
does not end.
This is fascinating. I love that you shared that. Okay, the last thing I want to ask you about your near-death experience is how in the world did you come back after all that time experiencing? How'd you come back?
The second time was a lot harder. I will tell you, the first time I was already with my grandmother, and they kind of just said you need to go back, and I was 7 years old, and I didn't know any better. And but the second time, I was really attached to being out there. I'd seen so much. I saw so much of this galaxy, and I mean that's just I mean, really, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the universe. One galaxy out of billions, but just having seen so much and experienced so much and learned so much, I felt like there was no way I wanted to go back. It's like, how do I, how do I go back to this after seeing that? And like that's where that analogy I gave earlier, where it talked about, going to every place you've always loved and always wanted to visit and ever heard about. Imagine going to all of that, doing that for 11 years straight, and then having to come back, and try to live your normal life after that. When I first came back from that experience, like first of all, I was after I learned about the future of humanity, which I learned first, and then how the universe works. My guide asked if I was ready to go back. No, no, I'm not ready to go back. No, you're not doing this to me again. But he said, look, you know now why you're having the experiences you're having. I know that this is hard on you, but it's hard on you for a reason. You know what that reason is now. So you will have a different experience of pain and suffering with the knowledge of why than you had before without that. And he said there's so much more that you have to do, so much more that you have to be, and more people that you need to help. And he said it's just the way things are. And he said it's not just you, it's every being that we send back. All of them have a reason to go back. All of them have a purpose. And so if you don't go back, you leave that purpose unfulfilled. And others that you would have helped don't get helped. And
Always a divine orchestration.
yeah, and just the way I saw things, especially after my life reviews, was how how much down the line information we get in these life reviews. Like, um, do you have time for a quick story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Um, if you can imagine a scenario where you run into somebody, say a woman and her child, or two kids in the grocery store. Okay, you realize by watching them for a few minutes that she doesn't have a whole lot of money. She's trying to get groceries, and you can see she's putting back necessary stuff, like not junk food, not want stuff, but need stuff that she's putting back in the shelf. And you realize why she's doing that. She doesn't have money. And she gets up to the cash register and is having, oh, please, can you take this off, and can you take that off? And you start to feel so bad for her, and everybody else is just like, oh man, come on, man, you're wasting our time, get out of the way. And everybody else just being normal, materialistic, uh selfish humans. But for some reason it sparks in you this desire to help. And maybe this month you have enough money where you've got some extra, maybe you were going to waste it on something, and instead you want to spend it on helping her. And so you go up to this woman and you say, hey, get everything you need. In fact, let's go back. Let's go back to these places. I saw you in this aisle, in this aisle, in that aisle. Let's go back and get those things that you put back. All of it. I want you to have everything that you need, and don't worry about how much it costs. I got you covered.
You're
And you
making
go
me
back
cry
and you
just
do
even
that.
talking about this.
Oh, I've done this before, and somebody's done this for me. So I know what this part feels like, as far as like the immediate feeling. Like,
Yeah.
helping somebody else. Like when someone helped me the first time, I was in a bad place in my early 20s I didn't have a whole lot of money, and um, I wasn't getting along with my family, and I was having to do a lot of things on my own. And it and I got to the grocery store, and one time I think I had maybe my last $50, and I needed at least $200 worth of stuff just to get through to my next paycheck. And I was putting back stuff after one thing after another, and I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm like, I literally sat there in an aisle for 10 minutes thinking, I don't know how I'm going to get through this month. I just don't know. I don't want to deal with this. I can't deal with this. And when I got up to the front, this woman looked at me, and for some reason she could just see looking at my face that I was as bad off as a person could get. And she said, "What do you need?" I said, it's too much. Don't worry about it. I'm just gonna get what I can and survive. I'll do the best I can. She said, "No, get what you need. I got you." And I've always been the kind of person it's very hard for me to accept help from other people because I had it drilled into me practically from birth by my parents that you are self-sufficient. You don't depend on other people. You're independent. You don't take money from other people. You give money to other people. And so I had that drilled into me, and that was my mindset. So accepting help was very hard for me. It still is even now, although I've gotten better about that, thankfully. But anyway, so she went through and she bought, I want to say $250 worth of stuff for me, even stuff I didn't just want stuff. It wasn't stuff I needed, just wanted. And she saw me eyeing something, just kind of passing by, but I was going to let it go. And she grabbed it and stuck it in my cart, you know? And if there's an angel on earth, it's that woman. I don't know what her name was. I never saw her again, but I always remembered what she did. And so a few years after that, when I had my first opportunity where I had some extra money, I had a good paying job, and I had a few $100, and I saw a woman and her kids in the store who looked just like I remember looking that day. And I was able to go up to them and say, I got you. Man, to this day,
You're
it
getting
breaks
all
my
of us. I'm sure I'm not the only one with tears in my eyes right now. I'm sure
no.
anybody watching this, because
Oh,
we've all been in that place at one time or another to
oh,
have
I
somebody
know, and
else
that's the
step
thing
up.
about it. It's like we're all. That's why we're here to help each other. It's because all of us have that time where we're suffering and we can't make it through. And we don't know how we're going to get through the month, and that's what other people are for. And I realized that, like the whole, if you've ever seen the movie Pay It Forward, that kind of
Yeah,
really solidified it for me. Like, it's not about just returning the favor to somebody else, to somebody who's done one for you. It's about doing for others what someone may have done for you and helping others out who maybe had nothing to do with what happens to you,
right.
like that kid in the movie did,
Yeah.
and I really got into the whole pay it forward movement for a long time, and I still try to do it when I can, but it's just like doing things for other people. It touches a part of me that I like being in touch with,
Yeah.
you know? And I don't know how else to put it but that, but it really,
Beautiful.
you know,
Oh,
it,
Andrew, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with everybody.
but,
Thank
but I
you.
wanted to tell you the part of that, um, that the life review shows that you don't see when you're doing it is the down the line effects. Like, let's say that woman you helped was between I have to buy groceries, but I also need to pay my rent, and I can only do one. Well, by buying her groceries for her, you made that choice easier. She was able to pay her rent, so that meant she and her kids didn't get evicted that month. Well, maybe that gave her the time to maybe she applied for a job and she had to wait for the offer to come through, and so she got the offer and she was able to survive after that, but she needed that month to get by.
Mm,
So she
wow.
didn't get evicted that month, and the kids they didn't end up in a homeless shelter. They were able to do well in school, um, and got better grades, and instead of ending up in a shelter where their grades would have suffered and it probably would have been a constant cycle of being stuck in this rut, where maybe the job wouldn't have come through because the job maybe requires you having a steady address, and in a homeless shelter you don't have that, so maybe
Mm,
she wouldn't have gotten the job at all.
right, right,
um,
right.
but
Wow.
so they got better grades. Maybe they go on to college. One of them becomes a doctor, and he saves lives that wouldn't have been saved otherwise. Maybe the other one um, creates something that humanity needs, some kind of invention that we wouldn't have had if not for him going to college or her going to college. And so all the people, you think of all the people that they have helped in their lifetimes, all the people that those people have helped, all the people that those people have helped, and so on and so on. One act of kindness that you do in this one moment that you might never think about again. It maybe, oh, it's just a great thing, but after today, it's a warm fuzzy feeling, but that's about all there is to it. For everyone else that kindness touches, it affects hundreds or even thousands of people that you will never see or meet. And
Until
all
your
of it
life review.
are positively affected because you helped that one person in that
Yeah.
one time.
Yep.
And we don't get that. That's the part we don't see. And I wish with everything I have that I could show that to people just once so they could understand why it means so much to me personally to help someone, because I see down the line how they might help someone else. I see that now, and I never used to see that before. So that is
Beautiful.
the biggest effect the life review had on me.
Andrew, this is exactly why I have been obsessed with the life review from the very beginning of this
Me
channel.
too.
Those are the guests I always sought out, were the ones who had the life review, because nothing impacts people more when they come back than somebody who's had a life review. It changes everything.
Yeah, like my hold on. So the one thing I have noticed of all the interviews that I've done, all the stuff I've talked about online, my descriptions of my life reviews and the effects that they've had on me, I think has had more of an impact and more of a resonation with people than probably everything else put together.
Yep.
And but the same for me as a being, like that separate life review where I saw that life where I harmed people and why I'm atoning in this life, that changed the whole direction of my life. When I came back from that, I mean, I'll give you this: it took me 4 months to get back to being human. I mean, the first week, I was talking to my doctors and my family, and I was trying to figure out why they weren't answering me. Didn't realize I was trying to telepathically communicate with them like I had been for what felt like 10 years to me on the other side. And I didn't realize that I was still doing it. Um, it took me forever to learn how to eat and sleep and breathe and walk and all that. I mean, I had to learn. It was like having a stroke. I had to relearn everything from scratch. It was like relearning how to be human
Yeah.
because I'm back in this body, and it felt like I've been gone for 10 years,
Yeah.
and I didn't know how to be me anymore. And to this day, I always tell people I've got like one foot on the other side and one foot on this side. I've
Yeah.
never fully come back from that.
Yeah. Makes
And but
sense.
once I reacclimated to being human again, um, it changed the whole direction of my life ever since, to point where I I have this driving need to help others, and explain things that other people maybe don't understand, help them get over their fear of death. That's a big one because I've
Yeah.
seen so many people with their fear of death, it ruins their life and the lives of people around them. And I have seen the beauty of death, not just mine, but other people. I've been in nursing homes and hospice care, and I used to work in a children's hospital for kids with terminal illnesses and conditions, and I saw people at their very end and how they smile and the beauty that they go through and how they're so like everyone around them is going nuts, but they're just calm and they
Mm.
had this unearthly calm about them. And I know where that comes from now. And so being able to help people and to help them not only lose their fear of death, but gain something that means more, that to me has been my life's calling.
Wow.
And like every time I can do that is, oh, there's no feeling like it. There's nothing like it.
Oh, so glad you shared all that. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, I would imagine that people who are watching, if they're still with us, if they got through your second NDE, so much detail, so much wisdom that you shared. I can't imagine having lived with all of this information since you were 14 when the world was so different than it is now. But I would imagine there are a lot of people watching who would love to connect with you. I
Mhm.
mentioned at the beginning that I know you because of my friend Ned, and I know that you're a moderator on that Facebook group for near-death experiencers. So why don't you tell people about that group and then how they can connect with you?
Okay, so this group, first of all, it's the biggest near-death experience group in the world, which I was not aware of, and even when I first joined it, Ned is the one who told me about it. We have about 600,000 members now, and they're from all over the world. I've talked to people from every corner of it. I became a moderator, and so I use that group to link up with and help a lot of different people. I've done interviews like this with other people, and people reach out to me through them in comment sections, and I've made a whole lot of new friends through that.
Amazing.
Always open to that. But yeah, if people have questions, they can either it's called near death experiences. Not there's no dash, no it's all just three separate words, near death experiences. And Ned Matinia is the guy's name who created the group and is the main admin. And then I'm one of the moderators listed. So if you see that, if you see my name as one of the moderators, you're in the right group. So you can either reach out through there, join the group, or if you want to reach out to me straight through Facebook or Messenger, I'm open to that. And then I have email address, which is Duke fan 1971, all one word, at AOL.com. And I'll put it in your comment section. You can put it in your description if you want to. But yeah, people can reach out to me through email, through Facebook Messenger. I have my YouTube channel, but there's not much on it other than my interviews, which I have a playlist for, which I can send to people if they want it. And I love talking to people. So anybody who has questions, comments, even if you disagree with me, even if you've been taught differently and your mind is made up, I get that. I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to convert you. I'm not here to change your mind. I'm here to answer questions if you have them. And whenever you're
Beautiful.
ready, they say that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
I love
So
it.
the teacher's here.
Well, Andrew, this has been a lot of fun. This is the longest interview that I've ever done for an NDE. And
About surprise.
I feel so lucky to be able to have a conversation like this with you. But Andrew, I want to thank you for what you are doing to help wake up the collective. It is so needed right now.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And it's amazing to help people, and it's like I said, it's part of my atonement process. But I would do it even if it wasn't for that.
I believe you.
I love being around people and helping people.
Amazing. And of course, this show is absolutely nothing without all of you who tune in to watch, to listen, and of course, to share these experiences with somebody who needs them. So thank you, everybody, for watching. Wow, a lot of complexity with Andrew's NDE. If you'd like to watch another super complex one, check out this one with Megan Brown.